Today on the Made to Be Great podcast, I have the great honor of interviewing Gold Star mom Karen Vaughn, who suffered a loss that I can't even imagine.
The hardest thing this leg ever did in my entire life was take that first step away from his body and leave him there.
As a father of three, and her message is so inspirational and gives such perspective to what many of us would call a problem or challenge or adversity, and the way that she deals with that adversity and the decision that she has made over and over again to live life to the fullest, to honor her son's memory and legacy and spirit and effort, has been an inspiration to me, and I hope that it's an inspiration to you too.
You were made to be great.
Don't settle for less.
You were made to be great.
Don't settle for less.
You were made to be great.
Don't settle for less.
You were made to be great.
Welcome to a special remote episode of the Made to Be Great podcast. I am here with a special guest today, Karen Vaughn, who was just kind enough to travel to Orlando and share her story. So I recently read your book, and through knowing you from working at Fairway, have heard some of your stories. So I wrote down some notes from her talk, which was about 45 minutes in total. And so I just want to let you kind of share what is most on your mind and heart now from the audience feedback. I wrote some notes down from what, if you want to share a little bit about who you are and what you're all about, and then I'll get into a couple questions.
Well, yeah, I loved being here, and I loved talking to and meeting the great people that you had at this event today. One of the gentlemen that just talked to me has Parkinson's, and he really honed in on what I talked about, because everybody has told him to quit running marathons. He was doing these amazing marathons and these amazing Ironmans.
Yes.
And he's like, I'm not quitting. I'm not going to let this disease define me. I'm going to go out fighting. I'm going to go out on my feet. And I'm like, that is exactly what I came here to say today. Go out. I'm never out of the fight. So I love that. Then I met another gentleman who I think I know I think he said it was his brother, and I think I've met him before, which was kind of cool.
Oh, wow.
He's a general. So
Small world.
yeah, so it was this, and then just lovely people that we had conversations with all around. Yeah.
Very cool.
And about me, I mean, I'm a Gold Star mom of Aaron Carson Vaughn, who was a member of SEAL Team 6. He was on the SEAL teams for 9 years, died in his 5th combat deployment. And his death kind of launched me on a path of fighting for freedom, fighting to protect and defend the cause of freedom, what he died for, making sure that America never forgets how many people have sacrificed their lives so that they can walk around in freedom, so that they can have events like this today. It just doesn't happen. I don't think people ever consciously are aware that this is not normal.
Yeah.
What we have here is not the norm across the nations. We have a very unusual government. And, Aaron fought and was willing to die because he believed that a representative republic was the noblest form of government ever devised by man. And he was willing to die for it. And basically, I am too. And I'm going to give everything I've got to make sure we maintain it and that it's sustained until I breathe my last.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Something that you shared with the group that was impactful to me was that you, we can clip this if you don't want this in
Yeah, it's okay.
Is when, after your son was killed, people would come up to you and give you, offer you pills to numb the emotional pain that you were feeling. And when you said, I want to feel this pain and experience it, I don't want to numb it, I want to remember what I did, I want to feel this. I think in our culture today, there's a lot of people, particularly in our industry, real estate, mortgage, there has been, although I feel like this is shifting now, the culture of using a lot of alcohol and to numb. I feel like there's been a shift, at least in people that I talk to, that they're trying to stay away from alcohol or use it a lot less, which has been cool to see. That was impactful to me. I don't know if you want to share anything from that.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I had great clarity about what I wanted from that moment. I know that probably doesn't make sense, but in those moments, I knew they were sacred. I knew that was a sacred moment in my life, and I did not want to zone out of it. I wanted to feel everything because at the end of the day, what I wanted most is for not 1 ounce of my pain to be wasted. And if I had zoned out or taken medications to zone out or used alcohol or any other method that people use to remove themselves from reality, I wouldn't have experienced some things that were absolutely I don't know, otherworldly, things I got to experience. And I don't know how far you go into Christian behavior in your podcast, but
We
just,
do quite a
yeah,
bit.
but just talking about it as a child of God,
Yeah.
I experienced the supernatural. There wasn't 1 second of that I wanted to be marred by medication or removing myself from God's presence, because it was literally a supernatural time in my life. And when we read that scripture that God draws near to the brokenhearted, that was such a defining truth for me in that time, because I have never felt His presence more clearly. And there would have been nothing that I would have done to have separated myself from His presence in that time. So I think that was my main motivation, is I wanted to stay on my feet. I wanted to stay present before Him. And I wanted the pain to count. I wanted it to mean something. Aaron's life deserved to mean something. His sister at one of his memorials, he had 3 different memorials, but at one of his memorials, his sister got up and spoke and said something that I'll never forget, because it's so absolutely true. She said Aaron was too good for this world, and he was. And we have all just spent a lot of our lives trying to make sure that we share His goodness, the goodness that He had inside Him, that we spread that throughout the country, that we make people remember that goodness is real, and that there are people who walk among us who are giants in faith. They're giants in kindness. They're giants in love and tenderness, and that's who He was. And so we all wanted to make sure that we exemplified that in His death.
Wow. It's a powerful story, very powerful story. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
And I think that when we go through grief, I think feeling the pain is an important part of the healing, and figuring out what the meaning is, like you mentioned, to honor that person by carrying their message or what they stood for forward.
Their legacy.
Their
Yeah.
legacy. Thank you. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, thank you.
And something else that you mentioned during your talk was that you shared about September 11th and the events of that day, asking the crowd, do you think this was the motivation for my son Aaron wanting to go and be a Navy SEAL? And that wasn't it. I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about that. That was also encouraging.
Yeah, when he came home on his 21st birthday, and he sat down at the table with his father and I, and he said, I stopped by the Navy recruiters office on the way home from work, and I joined the SEAL Challenge program. We hadn't heard those words in 4 years, since the knee injury. That was over. That was a part of his history, that dream. And so you can imagine how flabbergasted we were, right? And so we started lots of questions.
Right? Like,
what are you talking
do
about? And we found out that he'd already begun building muscle in his knee. Back then we didn't have the internet freely like we've got now. He would go to the library and get books and talk to people and physicians on how to build the structure of the muscle around his knee so that it would sustain him without the anterior cruciate ligament. We didn't know any of that was going on. And so when he told us that, and I wanted, before I get to the 9/11 part, all the time that Aaron had wanted to be a Navy SEAL, it was just going to be this fantastical job, right? He was gonna go do rescues and do amazing things that he would tell his children and his grandchildren about, and I'd get to pat myself on the back because, I raised a Navy SEAL. That's how it was. But when he said this to us, we were at war, and people were already dying, including Navy SEALs, and so it was
more rare.
Right, which is very rare because they're usually on the offensive, not the defensive. That's the nature of their work, and so it was completely different. So we were flabbergasted, and we just kept saying, what is it? What is it? We didn't get that night, but we found out over the next few days that that's what it was. That he literally like I mentioned when I talked, it wasn't the towers that fell. It wasn't the horror. Like everybody in the nation, we gathered our family together, huddled close, and tried to figure out what we were witnessing because, as you well know, we had never experienced anything like this on our soil before. Like we didn't even know.
The newscasters, I think,
They
were
didn't even,
confused
right. You remember everybody assumed it was you wouldn't assume
accident.
that now. You
Yeah.
assume somebody had a heart attack and flew into the World Trade Center. And so as we began learning what caused him to do it, we found out that it wasn't the Twin Towers, it wasn't the strike on the Pentagon, it was the 40 average passengers on board Flight 93 who stood up that morning and like they lived the entire mantra of what it means to be an American.
Yeah.
If not me, who? If not now, when? Right? And so they acted. They didn't wait for somebody to come to their rescue. They got together, they made a plan, and they acted on the plan. And that's what every patriot whose bloodstained boots throughout our history have paved the way of our freedom, that's how they did it. That's how they did it, saying, if not me, who? If not now, when? It's time to act. We've had many of those moments in American history, but those 40 passengers were part of that history. And, and Aaron had a tattoo on his arm. It said Moulin Leve. And I don't know if you are familiar with the story of the Leonidas, King Leonidas and the 300 Spartans. Mm-hmm. Well, they were trapped by King Xerxes. The 300 Spartans were the fiercest fighting force ever known to man. And they had just marched through city after city after city, and they finally found themselves trapped. And King Xerxes yelled out to them because he had so much respect for these Spartans, these 300 Spartans, as fighting men, that he yelled out to them, lay down your weapons and live. He didn't want to kill them. He respected them too much. And they shouted back, Moulin Leve, which means come and take them. And so he had that tattooed on his arm. And man, so many people have had it tattooed on their arms since that story came out, as Aaron's story started traveling around, but that's the spirit of America. That's the spirit of patriots, right? Of our founders who, I don't want to go down a trail here, but can you even imagine what it took to go across this? If you ever watch these shows like 1912 or whatever, you're just like, I can't believe people did that.
Yeah.
But we just live in this liberty, and we live with, automobiles and all these beautiful grocery stores and all these things around us. And we just think, well, that's just the way it's always been. No, it hasn't. People had to do hard things to give us this, like people went through hell to bring us to the point we are as a nation right now. And we cannot afford to forget that. So, yeah. But that's what it was. And like I said, it was when Todd Beamer, when we started hearing those phone calls come out from the families that they had recorded, those, whispered, I love you, and if I don't make it. And then we heard those two words from Todd Beamer that I say demolished us emotionally and then straightened our backs as a nation. Let's roll.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the mantra. And that's what did it. We found out that's what did it.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I appreciate that share. That's a great place of motivation and purpose, which is something else that we talked about today, is finding purpose.
Right.
And, those guys and gals on that plane had a purpose, and they knew there was going to be a cost.
Right.
And they fulfilled the purpose anyway.
That's right.
And that's a great message for all of us today, because there's opportunities to shrink back from challenges and display laziness and fear, which were other things that you mentioned. That was something else that impacted me when you shared that we should dream big and go after big things. And the only thing holding us back a lot of the time is either laziness or fear.
Right.
And so those are kind of small things to get in the way of your purpose, your God-given purpose.
I mean, because we're free, because we live in the United States of America, let me tell you this story real quick. Because I travel so much, I have this one guy, his name is Farah, who sometimes I hire to pick me up from the airport if my husband can't take me or something like that, or the situation is just where I don't want to leave a car there. And Farah came over here to America, and he built a very lucrative car service business. And we've become good friends through the years because he's been taking me places for many years now. And one day he told me, and you don't realize this because we're so limited in our experience, right, outside of the boundaries of the United States. He said, Karen, I've lived in, I think he said 7 different countries.
Oh, wow.
And he said every country that I would go to, they would limit me to, like, my neighborhood was made up of this kind of people, and we couldn't come out of that, and we certainly couldn't build anything successful because only this neighborhood could build successful things. And he said, when I got to America and realized that I could build a business and that I could service every nationality that lives in this country, he said, I could not believe it. I've never experienced anything like that. I've always been isolated alone with those who are like me, shoved off in a corner. And you're allowed to have fish markets or, but you certainly are limited. You cannot do whatever you want to. You have to fit into the industry that your people, service already, that we allow them to service in our nation.
To clarify for the listeners, this is like present day or near present
this was
day.
a
This
year
isn't
ago.
Like hundreds of years ago.
This was a year
that's
ago.
wild. Yeah.
And you don't think about that because we live in liberty where you can build anything you want to. Josh, you can assemble here today and invite people to, they're not afraid somebody's going to shoot us up because you can visit any church you want to. Parking lots of every single kind of church are full on Sundays because we live in liberty, and people just don't understand that. They don't understand what it's like to be somewhere else. Whenever you start challenging whether America's best days are behind you, are behind us, or America's not a great nation, I just challenge you to visit another country, like to really engage, not just go on vacation there to the Hilton
to
or
the best part.
To the best part of it. Live there for a year and see if you don't think America's pretty darn great. And so it's worth protecting, it's worth defending, and it's worth the continual fight it takes. As soon as you think you deserve what's in front of you, you've proven to everybody you don't deserve it, right? Like you have to know that every good thing you have comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility to protect it and defend it for those who are coming after you. You have to know that.
Yeah.
I can get on tangents.
I love the tangents. I think that reminded me of the first time I left the United States when I was 15. I went to Mexico, not the Hilton,
Right.
to build a home for a family.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in what I would consider like a normal American neighborhood. We weren't super rich. We weren't super poor. It was like your average normal middle class, upper middle class kind of area. And so we went to this rural area where there was a family with several kids. Their older child was probably, trying to think, maybe 8 or 9 years old. It was a daughter. And then they had a baby, also infant, like small. And both parents worked and left the infant with the like 8-year-old daughter all day.
Right.
And their house was a dirty mattress and some plywood leaning over like
A lean-to,
and that was like a paradigm shifting experience for me, because I had never seen that type of poverty
like that,
up close like that.
Right.
And it changes your perspective when you
Sure.
realize that our poor people probably live better than a lot of the world, like statistically. It's pretty wild to think about. But I do think that's an experience that everyone should do, is to travel and visit places like that, not just to the 5-star places and to the really nice places, but to see really
what
how
it really
does the
is.
rest of the world
How do they live?
What is their life like, and what opportunity do they have?
Right.
People wouldn't be dying to come here.
That's right.
If it was such a bad place,
You don't see people busting down the borders of Mexico to get in.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Or too
Or
many
Nicaragua,
other places.
or Cuba, or it's
because
just,
there's opportunity, right?
Right,
Like,
there's
you can come
opportunity,
here with literally nothing but
That's right.
work.
That's right. With an ethic,
effort,
with a work ethic. That's
and
right.
you can work in any neighborhood. You can do
That's right.
any industry. You can serve any type of client.
That's right.
And that is a beautiful thing that should be protected. And
I have a story. I met a woman several years back. Her name was Miriam Ibrahim. She was, I can't remember what country she was from. It's not on the tip of my tongue right now. But anyway, she converted from Islam to Christianity and got a death sentence for it. She was 6 months pregnant when they sentenced her to death. And I don't know why they kept her alive. I really don't know. But they chained her to this is not a joke. I heard her tell her story. They chained her to a concrete floor with her hands over her head, chained together, and her feet chained together at the end of her legs. And they let her lay there like that for 3 months while she finished her term of her pregnancy. She went into labor and they would not unchain her. They hoped she would die. She was in labor for hours, and the women who were watching through a window, watching this gruesome event take place, her legs were chained together. And the men wanted her to die. They just wanted her to die. And the women begged them to go let them help. And they went in, and all they were allowed to do was lift her bottom up off the concrete enough for the baby to come out. And then they took the baby and left her there. She finally got her freedom, and she came to America. She's completely traumatized. You can't touch her on the, like we were all warned, don't touch her. Don't put your hand on her shoulder. She can't be, like she's in horrible shape. But she was there to testify to the reality of what it looks like to live in other nations. And you just think about that. I mean, she had an American husband is the only reason she ended up getting freed. But I mean, people routinely are beheaded. Like we just don't have a clue. We act like our problems are so significant, and they're just stupid. And that's why I say live a life worthy of the sacrifice that's been made on your behalf, because it's only because of the sacrifices that have been made that we're not living like Miriam Ibrahim, Sudan. That's where she was from, Sudan. I mean, we just don't know. We're just so arrogant and we're so spoiled. That's it.
Yeah. My dad used to have this saying when I would ask him things like, why this, why that, why doesn't the homeless person just go knock on doors and ask if they need anything cleaned or what, and he's like, well, son, you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't
and
know.
So that's why
it's a good story. It's a good line.
Traveling to other places and talking to people that have come from other places, if you can't get there yet, and hearing stories like that from people who lived it. Is a great way to get perspective.
Yes, 100%.
And it is a gift that we have. And you did a great illustration toward the end of your talk with your wedding ring, handing it to someone and saying, this is a gift, and talking about the value of that gift. It's a pretty good size ring for those of you who are listening to this. And so that was a powerful illustration of the magnitude of the gift that we have and if you had a gift that nice, wouldn't you want to honor it and live into it?
Pass it to the next generation.
And pass it down, right? Because if it doesn't get passed down, then what?
Right.
Then we end up maybe like Miriam or
right. worse. That's exactly right.
And so it's something to be protected and something to be talked about. And so I'm glad that we're talking about it, because I think people need to talk about it more. And this isn't even... we were talking a little bit outside, and this isn't even like a political statement. This is like an American statement that's, freedom isn't free. It has a price. People have paid it for you willingly, and we can honor them by talking about it and protecting it for when I think of, I have 3 daughters, when I think of how do I want them to grow up. And there was a place that I worked before Fairway, and my primary clientele were foreign nationals. So I would get to talk to all different types of people from all different countries. And I talked to this dad from Egypt, and he was telling me how it was wild to the steps he had to go through just to get money out of Egypt into the United States. But then he was sharing the reason why he was doing it is because he had daughters, and he didn't want them. He didn't feel like they were safe, even in like the resort nice part of Egypt where they were. And it's like things like that. If you don't talk to people and you don't understand how a lot of the rest of the world lives and the freedom that they don't have, it can be easy to just take it for granted.
That's right.
Like you said, it's just there, and you don't think about it.
You don't think about any, and you don't think about any personal responsibility you have to preserve it. And that's why I like the ring story. It drives the point home with something that's tangible that everybody can understand. If I gave this to you, you would think I'd lost my mind, because you understand the value of a diamond. Yeah. But we just don't understand the value of freedom, because we just take it for granted.
We're talking about passing it down.
Yeah,
because I
you
think
give it
people
to the
can
next
understand
generation.
passing down a valuable thing like a ring or a
Right.
sentimental thing of value.
Right.
And I think that I haven't heard freedom put quite that way. And so it was a great illustration that I will probably reuse and credit you with.
Good.
Because
good.
it's a great visual, I think, that a lot of people can relate to. That's something that they probably have done or seen people do that makes a lot of logical sense to them, that they wouldn't necessarily connect with any type of physical or political freedom to even just criticize another party. I mean, there's a lot of countries where you can't even say anything about another, whoever's in power, because you'll end up
Look at Maduro
missing.
right now.
Yeah.
You know, what's happening in Venezuela is just, and then for some crazy reason, people in our country want to be like Venezuela. I'm like, what's wrong with you?
That could
like,
be a whole other
that could be a
episode
whole
about
other
healthcare.
episode, but-
I've talked to people about healthcare,
Yeah.
and you said this in your talk, and I've said this before. I don't know on the podcast or not, but there's nothing perfect, right?
Right.
Like there's no like. I get irritated with our medical system. You know, as lenders, when we talk to clients, we show them all the fees, and it doesn't matter where you work.
Yeah.
Like it's like you get the same interest rate, right? Like your interest rate's based on your credit score, the type of loan you're getting,
Right.
the dollar amount. It has nothing to do with anything else, and I can tell you what it is.
Right.
And it's wild to me that when I go, like, we needed a CAT scan for one of our kids. And I go and I asked, they already had our insurance, and I went and asked, how much is the CAT scan? And they're like, well, we can't tell you. We don't know. And I'm like,
to bill your
how do you
insurance
not know?
company?
It's your company.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so anyways, long story, I ended up asking the cash price, and they told me, I can't remember the amount, it was like 400 or 300, the cash price. And I'm like, just charge me the cash price. And they're like, well, we can't, we have
we
your insurance.
can't.
I'm like, can you forget? Anyway, so there's nothing
Yeah.
perfect. We
Yeah.
did end up getting
Right.
the cash price, which was great.
But let me just say this, and this is what I said in the speech.
Mm.
There is nothing perfect, but because of freedom,
You can fix
we
it.
have the right to voice our opinions about it and
Yes.
fight for reform
Yes.
for everything that is imperfect.
Which is what you need, right?
That's
you
right.
need
If
to
you-
be able to
you-
have
that's-
dialogue,
that's
and that's
exactly
something
right.
that I think is scary to watch. Especially, I'm 45, and I barely remember a time where you could say, I disagree or I feel a certain way
Yeah.
without automatically
Without
being
all hell
like
breaking loose.
the bad guy.
Yeah,
You know?
I know.
And
I
we
know.
need to be able to
Absolutely.
say things, because if we only talk to people who think and look and act exactly the way we do, then that's I think a recipe for a big problem.
The collapse of America.
Yeah.
Which
The
is what we're
collapse of
witnessing.
anything.
Yeah, the collapse of
because
anything.
if you
That's right.
can't talk about hard things and have some disagreement and try to work through it, that's part of what I remember, like, good political deals being like, Democrats get this, Republicans get that. There's like some negotiating.
Or
and
show me why you believe what you believe.
with
I mean,
data,
that used to
not
be
with like
right. That used to
your
be
mama jokes. It's
right.
like-
Right. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it
so
is.
It's a beautiful system. It allows for correction of things that need to be
That's right.
corrected. No country is perfect, and no country has a past or a present that's perfect and
No.
without issues. I think people don't give that enough credit.
I think we're spoiled.
you know. Yes.
I think we're just straight up spoiled. And you know what? When you're not trying to figure out what you're going to eat today, you have time to think about injustices again. You know what I mean? You have time to think about, well, I don't like how the healthcare system treats me, or, you know, I'm just using that as an example, or I don't like how this system works. So you have time to do that because you have no necessities to thrive here.
Your
you
physical
know?
health and
Right,
safety
your
is
physical health and
provided for.
safety is just a given. You're going to be taken care of. There's food. If you don't have food, there's food banks. There's always
Yeah.
a way to get the provisions you need to exist, so you have time to focus on your pet, on things that just nag you.
Yes.
Most people don't have that luxury to. You know what I'm saying? Like, they just don't have that luxury. What?
Yeah. No,
What?
they don't. No, he's flashing me a signal over there, smoke signal. So, yes, I appreciate that, and I just want to recap really quick the main point that you made about overcoming adversity was accept, adjust, and advance. Do you want to give like a 2-minute?
Yeah, accepting is just, it sounds like a simple concept, but it's not, because a lot of us get in positions and we start thinking this isn't fair, or why me? And we start hyper-focusing on the problem and how it's unfair to us to be dealing with this problem instead of accepting the problem and coming up with a strategy to overcome it. And that's what I'm saying in that thing. Accept it because it's not going to change by you hyperventilating over it. It's going to change by you accepting, okay, this is the reality. This is what I'm looking at right now. It's not a good situation, but this is what it is. And then you adjust. You figure out a plan to work around it. You figure out something you can do to course correct it, right?
Yes.
And then the most important thing, and what I said in my speech, and this is where most people get hitched up, is then you have to
Act.
advance on your plan. And most of us just bug out right here, because a lot of us can think in our mind, well, this isn't right, and I'm going to say this to such and such person. I'm going to get this fixed because, I'm just thinking of like workplace situations. Well, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to march in there, and I'm going to say, and you come up with this strategy, and then you go to work the next day, and you come home, and your spouse says, did you do it? And you're like, nah.
Yeah.
I couldn't make myself do it. And really my whole theory in advancing is, what have you got to lose? What have you got to lose? Because by not doing anything, you're staying in the same situation that is really stressing you, that is really causing you a lot of struggle and pain, taking the risk of, well, hey, they might fire me. Well, okay, that's not the end of the world, or this might go wrong. Okay, well, nothing that comes, none of the reactions to what you're going to do, if you're right about what you're doing, none of the reactions are going to ruin you. They're going to launch you to a better place. They just always will. Because the worst place you can be is fretting and crying and whining. Why me? How did this happen to me? Why is this happening to me? Why aren't they fair to me? Why is this so unfair? That's the worst place in life to live,
You
because
have no power. You're
that's
giving
right.
away
You're
your
giving
power.
away all of your power. And when you start adjusting and advancing, you're gaining your power back. And you know what? If it doesn't go your way and it doesn't go like you planned, that's okay. Because a lot of good things come out of failure. A lot of good things come out of failure.
You learn,
That's
you get
right.
feedback.
That's
right,
exactly right.
From the market.
That's right.
Something that our CEO at Fairway, Steve Jacobson, says a lot that stuck with me when he first said it. I think it was at the beginning of 2022, which was our hard market cycle in the mortgage and real estate space.
Yeah, 2 years after I became a loan officer.
Yeah, you came in at a boom time, and then it was like
I had a couple years that were
halt. And he said the situation is the boss.
Right.
And I was like, I love that
because,
and I've used this analogy. I love analogies. My kids will tell you that. Is you could like want to go to the beach, but if a hurricane's coming, you're not going to have a very nice time. Okay,
right.
Like the situation is the boss,
right?
And so that's what I thought of when you said accept it. Like accept the situation, adjust.
Right.
The market shifted, adjust, act.
Right.
It will feel bad.
Right.
You will be uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. You didn't yet put in the reps to have that muscle memory, but there's nothing to gain by staying and not acting and adjusting, except if you just complain and you surround yourself with
feeling
people
sorry
who
for yourself,
just ruminate on a negative thing, that you're going nowhere.
And also, the big thing to remember when you decide to do that, and so many people do decide to do that, just ruminate and whine and complain, is every single person in your sphere is also being affected by your behavior. I mean, that's something I learned after Aaron died. Like when and Carrie can tell you, like when Aaron died, one of the first things that I said to myself is, you are not going to be unhappy the rest of it, because it felt to me like there would never be another smile on my face, and I kept saying, because I'm a funny person. I like to joke, I like to play and compete and like be alive. And in that minute, I thought, I'll never feel like Karen Vaughn again. I'm a different person. And I kept telling myself, you're not gonna say that to yourself. You're not gonna make that agreement. Like you're not making that agreement. This is not who you're gonna be. And I kept saying it over and over again because I knew instinctively, even in the first hours after I learned that my son was dead, I knew instinctively that my behavior would be the guide for how everybody else dealt with this situation. And so I think often we don't think about how our behavior is affecting everybody else. Just for instance, my husband needed hearing aids. He kept saying, for years he needed hearing aids. He kept saying, I just don't want to get hearing aids. And finally one day, I just sat down and said, you do realize the stress that you create on everybody who loves you because you refuse to get hearing aids. it's not just about what you want. You're making a choice to, and this is maybe a bad example, but I think it's a
Yeah,
good
it's a
example
different way to
because
think about
it's a different way
your
to think
choices.
about it. Okay, I don't want it, but do you want everybody else to never be able to have a conversation with you? Like to always
Or have
feel
to
like they,
struggle and
or have to
labor over
struggle
it.
and labor
Yeah.
over a conversation? Or do you want to just do what's good for everybody and get the hearing aids? You got the hearing aids, right? Same thing like when a person deals with anxiety or something like that and they don't want to take the medication that's necessary for them. Like, okay, you're fine. You don't want to take, and this is another maybe bad example, but it's just something that comes to my mind. Okay, you don't want to take the medication to deal with your anxiety, but do you realize how your anxiety is affecting everybody around you? So do something about it. If medication isn't the answer, figure out what the answer is because it's changing everyone's life around you. And so I think we just have to think bigger than ourselves. It's just a basic principle, you know. You've got to think of what it's doing to everyone else for you to get trapped in this is unfair, because there's nothing more pitiful than a person sitting in a ball saying this is unfair. Nothing more life-ending than that.
That's powerful coming from you because you mentioned this in the talk a little bit, was if there's anyone who would get a pass to say something like that, it would be you.
Right.
And so you're leading in that at a high level, saying that means a lot coming from you to that you can. I think, like, what scenario as a father, what scenario could I think of that would be harder? I can't think
There's
of one.
not one.
And so any other thing that comes into our world, much easier.
I hope that I create perspective
Yeah.
for people.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it does, is creates perspective. Your problems really aren't that big deal. You're losing money. Okay, money can be made again. You know, you're going to lose this house. Okay, you'll buy another
You can get
house
another
down the
one.
road. You
Yep.
can rent for a while. You know what I mean? Like, it gives great, when you've gone through what we've gone through, I have tremendous perspective about what real problems are. And for the first several years after Aaron died, I would get really irritated with people who were whining about what I consider to be really insignificant problems, you know, but they were letting them kind of shut them down, you know. And I grew some grace over it, you know, because I realized, well, Karen, that's exactly how you were before God gave you the perspective of, you know, burying your son. It's exactly how you were. But I also want to be helpful and instructing in those situations that, hey, you have a right to do this if you want to, but it's not benefiting you.
Yeah.
You know,
I think we can get caught up in like trying to come up with the perfect plan. And something that I've tried to think about more clearly is, you know, any action is better than no action, because it will either work or you'll learn something that you could try a different way and maybe it'll work next time. You're giving yourself an opportunity versus just giving yourself misery by just not trying anything.
You're
So,
explaining a phrase I came up with years ago that I kind of even couldn't even believe I came up with it, but it kind of became this iconic phrase that everybody in my circle used. Inaction is action.
yes.
What
That's a
you
cool-
choose not to do could have a more profound effect on
No
eternity.
decision is a decision.
That's right.
You're deciding not to
That's
do
right.
anything.
You're deciding to do nothing. Inaction is action, and those situations sometimes speak much more loudly into the course of your life or the course of your situation than something you might do.
Say that one more time. That's how we're going to close this out.
Inaction is action.
Thank you today for joining us for another episode of the Made to Be Great podcast. And thank you, Karen, for agreeing to come to this remote set today and record this episode. Thank you so much.
Nice to be
Appreciate
with you,
it. Helped a
Josh.
lot of
Thank
people.
you. Thank you. It's
Thank
good
you.
to be here.
Likewise.